Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man tabi'ahum bi ihsanin ila yawmiddin wa ba'd. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu taqullaha haqqa tuqatihi wa la tamutunna illa wa antum muslimun. My dear brothers and sisters in Islam, we continue with this short series on marriage, what we might call the art of marriage in Islam. And the reason I'd say art is because, like all forms of expression and emotion, there must be balance for it to be pleasing. And when you look at marriage in Islam, you'll find that a balance must be struck between two foundational things. As we've talked about in the previous sermon, we were reminded that marriage in Islam is built upon a contract. And that contract affords both the husband and wife a number of rights. It secures certain rights and provides certain expectations that we each have to live up to for the marriage to be balanced and fair. And then, of course, the fruits of the marriage are going to be based on not only adhering to that contract, but developing and maintaining mutual love and mercy between the spouses. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this very thing. He says, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ أَنْ خَلَقَ لَكُم مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا. You may remember this verse when you got married yourself. Allah says what means, and of His signs, is that He created for you from yourselves mates. From you He created your mate, لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا, in order that you may find tranquility in them. وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَكُمْ مَوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً, and then He placed between the two of you love and mercy. إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَاتٍ لِقَوْمٍ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. For indeed in that is a sign or are signs for a people who give thought and reflect. Surah Ar-Rum, that's chapter number 30, verse number 21, talking about the love and the mercy that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts between the husband and the wife. This verse, it's clear. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is indicating that there are means to achieving this love and mercy. Often it's given to us as a gift. Then it is our job to protect, to preserve, to maintain, to perhaps grow in love and mercy for our spouse. Allah has created us in a compatible manner. That's right off of the bat. He says He created you, He created from you a spouse, meaning someone like you. We find partners that are similar to us, compatible in so many different ways. It's a great blessing. And given us the tools to love each other. And even though Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses us with the feelings of love that we have, He's made us responsible for the relationships that we enjoy with our spouses. And so if we want our spouses to love us, we're all after that when we get married, at least the majority of us are, we must do what is necessary to endear ourselves to them. Think about it in that way, as opposed to, why don't they love me? They should love me. You should think of, am I a lovable person? How can I be more lovable in the eyes of my spouse? If we want our spouses to love us, we have to be lovable people. And for a loving marriage, we're obliged to look within our own selves first to see how we are either helping our marriage or we ourselves are harming that relationship. And this approach is often the most difficult when it comes to love because it requires personal accountability. We have to be accountable for our own relationships. We have to be responsible. When we take personal responsibility for this relationship, we can be empowered to achieve the results that we're after. So the first thing, I would say the most powerful avenue to achieving love in this relationship is focused not on the relationship itself, but focused on the one who granted you such a relationship, and that is Allah. The most powerful means to achieving a relationship filled with love is to focus on your personal relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is Allah who is in control of the hearts. He changes them as He wills, flipping them one way or the other. And not only is this changing of the hearts in regards to our faith and our guidance, but also in regard to our heart's connection with others, the relationships that we have. And He has promised those that He has blessed in this life, that He loves. He has blessed them with His divine love. He has promised them the love and acceptance of the rest of creation. Think about that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised those who have gained the love of Allah that others in turn will love Him. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Inna Allah idha ahabba abdan da'a Jibreel." He says that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves a servant, He calls upon Jibreel, فَقَالَ إِنِّي أُحِبُّ فُلَانًا فَأَحِبَّهُ. He says to Jibreel, I love so-and-so, and so you are commanded to love them in return. Allah loves someone, He commands Jibreel to love that same person. قَالَ فَيُحِبُّهُ Jibreel. And in response, Jibreel then loves that person. ثُمَّ يُنَادِي فِي السَّمَاءِ. And it is then called out to the people of the heavens, فَيَقُولُ إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ فُلَانًا فَأَحِبُّوهُ. Allah loves so-and-so, to the dwellers of the heavens, meaning the angels, so you are obliged to love them. فَيُحِبُّهُ أَهْلُ السَّمَاءِ. And then the dwellers of the heavens, they will love that person. قَالَ ثُمَّ يُوضَعُ لَهُ الْقَبُولُ فِي الْأَرْضِ. And then acceptance for them will be placed in the earth. After you have gained Allah's love. And in return, as a consequence to that, as a reward, the dwellers of the heavens, the angels will love you. And then the acceptance of mankind will be placed upon the earth. Brothers and sisters, our relationship with Allah, it should be first and foremost in our lives. This is the most important connection that we can make. And I know that we're talking about loving your spouse, your husband, or your wife. But before our hearts are attached to someone else, they must be attached to our Lord. To have a healthy relationship with another creature, we must first have a healthy relationship with the Creator. This is of the utmost importance. We can't expect our spouse to bear the burden of providing us with all the fulfillment and love that we need when they themselves are also looking to be loved and fulfilled. That's a mistake we make sometimes. We're expecting our husband or our wife to provide us with all the love and all of the fulfillment. I need it all from you. When perhaps ignorantly, unknowingly so, you're expecting that from someone who also has to be filled, also has to be loved. And so where can you find true love and fulfillment from? You can only find that with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so if you rely solely on your spouse to complete me, the Hollywood idea, the romanticized idea of love and marriage, you complete me, you're reliant upon someone who is weak, insufficient, and in comparison to Allah, insignificant to the love that they could perhaps provide you. And so you will constantly be disappointed and frustrated because they will not be able to fulfill you constantly throughout the duration of your short lifespan. Brothers and sisters, our lifelong focus should be to search out Allah's love before anyone else's. And if we're able to truly love Allah and then gain Allah's love in return, He will bless the relationship that we have with our spouse. We have to recognize as people of faith that our lives are not compartmentalized. Everything that we do, it doesn't occur in a vacuum. They're not isolated actions and incidents that don't impact the rest of our lives. Rather, there is a direct connection, be it the joy and happiness that we feel, the sadness and sorrow we suffer from, the hardships and challenges that we face, or the very delicate relationships that we share with our spouses. It's all connected. And so seeking to please Allah and to gain His love is a primary means to fulfillment and satisfaction. And this primary means cannot be ignored for the sake of that which is secondary. We can't ignore Allah because we're chasing after someone else constantly. And so we sacrifice that primary relationship. It must be given preference and combined with those other relationships that we share, especially our marriages, in order to achieve success and to gain our spouse's love. And if it's not, and we're negligent in that regard, meaning we're negligent in regard to Allah, we're likely to see a negative impact in our marriages. Sometimes we may sacrifice our relationship with Allah because we're fixated on a relationship with our spouse. And so we can see the negative impact happening within that very relationship that we're so fixated on. If you think about this, the pious of the past, they would say, Inni la'asillah. They said, I would sin against Allah. I would disobey Allah. فَأَرَى ذَلِكَ فِي خُلُقِ دَابَّتِي وَامْرَأَتِي. And then I would see that, the result of that sin, in the character or the manner of my riding animal as well as my spouse. Because they neglected Allah. Again, it didn't happen in a vacuum. That disobedience didn't happen over here in the corner and everything's isolated from that. But when you disengage from that relationship with Allah, you turned your back on the divine, then it's going to spill over to every part of your life, including your marriage. And this was noted by the pious of the past. They would see the result of their sins unfolding in the character of their wife or in the character of their husband. They noticed that if they were not right with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah's creatures were not right with them. It was a direct connection. They knew that the love they received from others, it was a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a reward for their faith and their obedience. The love that you enjoy is a reward. It's a gift from Allah Azza wa Jal. Think about this for a moment. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ سَيَجْعَلُ لَهُمُ الرَّحْمَنُ وُدًّا. This is directly from the Quran in Surah Maryam, chapter 19, verse number 96. Allah says, what means, verily those who believe and work deeds of righteousness, Ar-Rahman, Allah will bestow love for them. Will bestow love for them. And according to Ibn Abbas, that love is placed in the hearts of mankind in this life. It's the love that you experience here in this world. The love that others have for you. It's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if you want to endear yourself to your spouse, meaning you want them to love you, you want to be a lovable person. I want to be loved by my spouse. You have to turn it over to the divine by getting right with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first. And as a result, He will place that love in the heart of your spouse for you. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين من كل ذنب فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. بسم الله والحمد لله حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه كما يحب ربنا ويرضاه ونصلي ونسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما أما بعد. Brothers and sisters, I don't know about you, but at times it seems like gaining the love of your spouse or trying to endear yourself to them is one of life's greatest mysteries. Sometimes it seems unsolvable. How can I gain the love of my spouse? It seems that way at times because often the spouse doesn't even really know themselves. That's how we are. The human heart is very fickle. It's constantly moving in different directions. So to catch that, to hold on to that, is one of life's mysteries at times. And while gaining the love of your spouse may appear to be a mystery to many of us, gaining the love of Allah is crystal clear. It should never be a mystery because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has spelled it out for us in the Quran and in His Prophet's guidance and instruction. Again, looking at this from the perspective of gaining Allah's love is primary when it comes to the relationships that we enjoy of this world, including the relationship that we have with our spouse. So how do we begin to seek out the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? How do we obtain that? One of the most important means is by way of fulfilling our obligations and then following that up with voluntary acts of devotion. That's where you begin. How do I gain Allah's love? You begin right there. The fundamentals of worship. The Prophet ﷺ, he said that Allah said, "Man adali waliyan faqad adantuhu bil harb." Says that whoever shows enmity to a wali of mine, meaning someone that is dear to Allah, then I have declared war against him. He says, وَمَا تَقَرَّبَ إِلَيَّ عَبْدِي بِشَيْءٍ نَحَبَّ إِلَيَّ مِمَّا افْتَرَضْتُهُ عَلَيْهِ. He says, there is nothing that the servant can do that will draw them near to me except, which is more beloved to me than what I have obligated upon them. Meaning the obligations are the first primary avenue to gaining the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, وَلَا يَزَالُ عَبْدِي يَتَقَرَّبُ إِلَيَّ بِالنَّوَافِلْ حَتَّى أُحِبَّهُ. And then He will continue to draw near to me with the voluntary acts of worship until I love Him. Meaning Allah loves that servant. فَإِذَا أَحْبَبْتُهُ, He says, and if I love him, كُنْتُ سَمَّعُهُ الَّذِي يَسْمَعُ بِهِ, I will be his hearing with which he hears, وَبَصَرَهُ الَّذِي يُبْصِرُ بِهِ, the sight with which he sees, وَيَدُهُ الَّتِي يَبْطِشُ بِهَا, I will be his hand with which he strikes, وَرِجْلَهُ الَّتِي يَمْشِي بِهَا, his foot with which he walks, وَلَئِنْ سَأَلَنِي لَأُعْطِيَنَّ, if he asks me, I will certainly give him, وَإِنْ اسْتَعَاذَنِي لَأُعِيذَنَّ, and if he seeks refuge in me, then I will certainly protect him. This hadith is very famous, found in Sahih Bukhari. And this is the hadith Qudsi. It's one of those hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ is speaking for Allah Azza wa Jal. And it's a foundational teaching of our religion, highlighting how fulfilling obligations, following that up with recommendations and voluntary acts, is the pathway to Allah's love. And the result of Allah's love is His protection and fulfillment of your prayers. You find this as a foundational teaching which was presented by Imam al-Nawawi in his 40 hadith, which show us all the basics of our religion. So there's nothing more endearing that you can do than to fulfill your obligatory deeds. And that means, so what are the obligatory deeds we're talking about? So it's very clear. Again, this is not a mystery. It's not a love mystery that we have to figure out how to solve, like the heart of our significant other, the mystery that lies within that heart. It's not a mystery here. The obligations are first and foremost prayer. Prayer on time. Your 5 daily prayers. That's where it begins. Your 5 daily prayers are the difference between al-kufr wal-iman. Either disbelief or faith. That's the distinguishing factor there. Are your 5 daily prayers being performed as they should be, when they should be? If you're struggling in your relationships, and your marriage is suffering, I'm telling you right now, let's start right here. The basics. Let's start right here. We'll get to the other things, how you're treating, etc. But you have to begin from the foundation. If you're not right with the Creator, you're not going to be right with His creatures. That means fasting Ramadan, making up the days that you might have missed before the next Ramadan begins. That means paying your zakat on an annual basis. That means making hajj when you're able to do so without delay. And then the other obligatory acts of our religion. After you fulfill those things, you embark upon voluntary virtuous acts until you gain the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Brothers and sisters, this is one of the primary means to gaining Allah's love, is to fulfilling our obligations. And there are many other avenues, just to name a few, because each of these avenues, each of these means is a subject in and of itself. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah At-Tawbah, chapter number 9, verse number 7, He says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الْمُتَّقِينَ, that Allah loves those who are mindful of Him. In Ali Imran, chapter 3, verse number 146, He says, وَاللَّهُ يُحِبُّ الصَّابِرِينَ, and Allah loves those who persevere and are patient. In Ali Imran, verse number 148, He says, وَاللَّهُ يُحِبُّ الْمُحْسِنِينَ, Allah loves the good doers. In Al-Baqarah, verse number 222, He says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ التَّوَّابِينَ, Allah loves those who are oft repentant. And in the same verse, He says, وَيُحِبُّ الْمُتَطَهِّرِينَ, and He loves those who purify, meaning purify their heart from disbelief and hypocrisy, etc., and purify their body, as is prescribed in our tradition. In Al Imran, verse number 159, He says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الْمُتَوَكِّلِينَ, and Allah indeed loves those who put their trust in Him. In Surah Al-Ma'idah, verse number 42, He says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الْمُقْسِطِينَ, He loves those who are just. In Surah As-Saff, He says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الَّذِينَ يُقَاتِلُونَ فِي سَبِيلِهِ صَفًّا كَأَنَّهُمْ بُنْيَانٌ مَرْصُوصٌ, and Allah loves those who fight for His cause altogether as if they were a single structure. Brothers and sisters, I guess after that, what I'm trying to say is that loving Allah and gaining the love of Allah is the starting point for gaining the love of our spouses. If we cannot love Allah, the one who has given us everything, if we cannot find in our hearts love for Allah, who has given us everything, all of the things that we've come to love and enjoy, how is it possible that we could truly love someone else? There's no one more deserving of love than Allah. There's no competition. It doesn't measure up. It's not even fair to put them in the same category. Allah over His creatures. If you cannot love Allah and pursue the means by which you can gain the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then I'm afraid there's little hope for the success of that relationship, because this is where it begins. And if you cannot work to gain His love with all of the means and avenues that He has spelled out clearly, providing for us, not a mystery, something very quite clear, how are we going to unlock the mysteries found in the hearts of our significant others? Brothers and sisters, if you go with Allah, you will never go wrong. And so we ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us in this life and in the next, that He guide us to the straight way, the way of our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that He put love in our hearts for one another and love us in return for loving Him. We ask that He continue to pardon and guide, to forgive us and provide, and that He relieve our brothers and sisters who are suffering around the globe and deliver them from their oppressors. We also ask, it's a very special request and personal supplication, to shower His mercy upon our dear brother Nazim Ahmed's father, one of our longtime community members here. His father passed away yesterday in Bangalore, being prayed upon today there. We ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala magnify the reward of his remaining family and grant them patience as they mourn their loss of their loved one. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.
Allahu Akbar, Allah.